Okay, what I'm doing here is I am just laying out stencils for a sign. I'm not being perfect on it because it really doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. And of course, here it is. I was gonna say I laid down my pencil and now I can't find it. So all I did was kind of estimate where the letters are gonna go so that they're kind of evenly spaced, where I'm gonna put the bottom of the stencil so that it is in line. And then I figured where approximately I'm gonna put the second row and did little ticks. I just used the ruler on my level and made little ticks. And then you can go through here and line it up. I can either go back and erase my pencil marks. I can just leave my pencil marks because this is going to be a sign and you're going to be looking at it from the road. So the chances that you're going to see my pencil marks are like pretty slim. So I can erase them with an eraser, or I can just use white paint and go over it. Sometimes the eraser doesn't work very well. So I'm just going to line up the bottom and then I'm going to stencil. And I use the stencils a lot as an outline, but not as the stencil part. So I won't draw lines where the stencil portion would go. I'm drawing the lines so that I can fill it in. So if you see here, I left it so I can paint here. I didn't fill in the line, okay? So we're going to do building, and I'm just going to estimate where I place the stencil as far as the space in between them. I'm really just going to eyeball it. One thing I've done in the past is, if this is the distance that the first two letters have between them, then I can use this kind of as a template. So I drew a line, the next one is I. So I drew a line where the edge of the next letter is going to go. And so then I know I'm really close. Since it's an I just used the edge of the D because it was right here. So now I need to find an L. You can see that at one point I painted something burgundy with some of the letters. But typically I do something with a pencil and then go back over it. You can go over it with like a marker, a permanent marker, a chalk pen, a pencil. If you use an ink pen and you press down hard on your wood, it's going to make an indentation, a groove in the boards, which can be helpful as far as, then it makes it kind of a line for your paint. And it makes it harder for you to get out of the line because the paint, as you get close to the edge, the paint is going to go in the groove that you created when you pushed your pencil down. So that's one technique. And even if you're not going to paint or like fill in the letters completely with a not a magic marker, a permanent marker, you can still use a marker just as your outline, and then you can paint over it. It's just nice because then it's thicker and normally smooth. So we're writing building. So I've talked about how I'm going to be putting my shop building up for sale because we have renovated my barn here at home, and I'm going to be moving my shop out to the barn and online. So right now I mainly just sell as I post something on Facebook or Instagram, but for 2020 I'm going to get things listed on a website in the more traditional sense. I'll still continue to sell things on social media as well, but I think it'll be a great opportunity for my customers to just peruse through an online catalog. So I've been thinking, I've known I was going to do this pretty much all of 1919, and you can see that I've yet to put the building up for sale, even though heck, it could take 2 years to sell it. And we have yet to get the barn done. So I'm trying to just go with it, know that things go at their own pace. This eraser, this is like a vintage pencil, so whoo! It's like a chalk on a chalkboard. Not a good feeling. Gets you goosebumps up the back of your neck. Okay, so I didn't really space out the for sale. So on building, 1, 2, that's 4 and 8 letters, and for sale is going to be 7, but we're going to have a space between it, and this one has 2 eyes, so that's going to make it smaller. So I know, just thinking about that, my for sale is going to need to be out farther or a smaller space between the letters. So I think I'm going to start all the way over here. So I'm planning on just painting this with a black paint because I have that in my stash. And I'm actually disappointed because as I was shaking it, I got paint all over myself. Just because the lid is rusting and it was coming out through the rust holes in the lid, and it's not even that old of paint, so I'm just really confused on why it is rusting. It's actually probably the second can of paint that I have had the lid just rust terribly. And the paint isn't even that old. I have older cans of paint and they don't even have a speck of rust on them. So I don't know if a company has used a different kind of, put something different in their paint. If it's a different kind of metal or something, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm curious if anybody else has had that issue. Now I haven't been painting as much just because I've been remodeling it in the barn, and in here I pretty much had no workspace because I had literally everything that wasn't in the shop was jam-packed in here so that we could work on the space. Okay, so we've got 4, and then I was just trying to decide where I wanted to do the sale. So I'm a really technical spacer. That looks pretty good. If I do, I'm trying to think and make it even space. So I basically went over a letter from here, so I'd kind of like it to be going over a letter. So if that's E, then it would be L. I used L earlier. Here we go. So L would basically be where D is, A, and S. So that's going to be a pretty good gap, but that's okay. So I'm actually going to work backwards because I know I have plenty of space to do that, and that will kind of leave me up with how much space is in between the word for and sail. So I'm not going to lie that when I've done these stencils before, especially since I'm talking to you guys right now, where I've totally misspelled something. So definitely make sure before you break the paint out that you make sure you spelled it correctly. So I'm still going to use the technique with this U as my spacer. It'll just kind of be working backwards. So sail would be L. So this will be kind of hard because I need my L line to be down here so I can see it. And yes, I probably could freehand this and it would look fine, but sometimes it's just nice to use a stencil. Okay, so this one is going to be an A, so we need a line down here at the bottom so I can butt it up. So by butt it up means I'm getting my line on the bottom and then I'm just going to go over and go up high enough with it. I'm lining up the bottom on our line, and then I'm just going to slide over until I'm seeing that tick. And then I know my spacing's about the same. Now on letters like L and A, sometimes because they have so much like space in between them, that sometimes you know, if your stencil is already a pre-made word, they will put these closer together. But I obviously am not worrying about that. Okay, so this time, I don't know how we're gonna do that. We're gonna just flip it over, go to the edge of the A, get you lined up at the bottom, and then this is going to be an S. So hopefully we can see the line here. So line up at the bottom, kind of the same thing with my A. I'm just going to slide over until I see that pencil line in the curve of my S. There, I'm seeing it. Slide back over, drawing my line. Some other ways that you can do stencils is you can actually print it off on your printer and do the reverse copy of it, lay that paper down, and you can rub really hard over it with a pencil, and it will kind of use it like a transfer paper. And give you a stencil that way. So this is probably going to be messy because, again, I said that my container all rusted. I like to use a flat, fat brush. So this style of brush, this one is probably a little bit too big, but I grabbed it as well. But I like them to be similar size to what it is that I am painting. And I like to use the lid kind of as my palette, or I will transfer some paint onto a paper plate. And that way I can go back and forth with my paintbrush in the paint. And again, this does not have to be perfect because it's just a building for sign sale. It's not like I'm selling the sign. It's not like someone's going to be looking at it up close. And if the paint doesn't have good coverage, if it's like a lot of light areas and dark areas, then I will just let this dry and then I will go back over it. But because I'm right-handed, I definitely want to start on the left side of the sign anytime you're making a sign, because see how my elbow and my hand would be smearing and messing everything up if I'd already painted the letters and worked from the right to the left. So you definitely want to think about those things before you start painting. If you didn't, then you would stop. I would, stop doing the G when I realized that, come to the left side and get started, and then hopefully by the time you get down to the other end, it's dry enough. I am kind of trying to smooth out the brush strokes. Because those are going to have more paint on them and be thicker and darker. And so, again, it doesn't matter for what we're doing, but if you are practicing, to make a sign for your house or to sell. And I am blessed with a steady hand, I think, because I know not everybody can do this. So that's why, maybe using a pen and tracing with some extra pressure might be a good idea for some of you, because then it gives you a groove that the paint is kind of, it's not going to be 100% perfect on preventing you from painting over the line, but it definitely helps. And then if you wanted to pretty up something like this, you can always add a shadow to it. So I could come back in here with white maybe. Well, white wouldn't work because of the white sign. But maybe a gray. And with that, you just think about where the light is shining from. And everything kind of behind that or under that is not going to be visible to the sun, and so it gets a shadow. So as I use up the paint on the lid, I would just take either this brush or a bigger brush and take a dollop of it and put it on the lid so that I had more paint to work with. I'm not pressing very hard. can always turn your brush and go a different way. Because if I'm coming down and my line is on the right, sometimes I can't see the line. So I'm just trusting that I'm going straight. But if I turn my brush and I go away from my body, then I can see that line more closely. Doing this makes me think of Bob Ross, and Matt and I actually dressed up as Bob Ross, and I was one of his little trees for Halloween one year. But you want to press gently on your brush. I think that's one of the keys to having a steady hand, is that you apply a little bit of pressure. You kind of see where the edge of the brush is going, and then you know the distance you need to be away from the line when you're painting. And this is just latex. I will just paint with whatever I have. Like if I want to use a certain color on a sign, and most of what I have here is latex. I'm not going to use milk paint obviously as a sign, but if I had a color of chalk paint that I really liked and wanted to use, then I would go ahead and use that. Or I do have a few bottles of acrylic paint, and I would use that as a sign, a stencil or whatever also. There's some globs in this paint, so I'm just trying to not get them. And when I get a lot of extra paint on my brush, I kind of stay away from the edges until I get some of it off. Because there's definitely a too much, too little on paint on your paintbrush. But see how I use the stencil, but I don't use the stencil? I don't keep those line breaks or spaces in the letters. I go ahead and fill them in. I think it makes it look less like a stencil. And then this board, my parents have both ran for office, and they used these signs for their political signs, and then we've just painted over them and repurposed them for different things over the years. So it already has like some stakes as the legs. And so how I get those into the ground is I will use my dad's fence post driver with a metal fence post, and I will make a hole in the ground with that metal fence post. Then what I will do is pull the metal fence post up. That leaves a hole, and when I do it, I will push it forward, push it back, push it side to side, because I'm wanting to make a hole in the ground that is big enough for these legs. And so once I get it pulled out, I normally have the sign legs laying right there beside it anyway, so I know like the spacing that I need. And then I put the post leg in that hole. And then I do the other side, repeat the process, and then once I have both sign legs in the holes that I've made, then I will use a sledgehammer, or I shouldn't say a sledgehammer, a rubber mallet, and or my body weight, and stick it into the ground more securely. So by body weight, I will just kind of hold the thing, hug the thing, the top of the sign, and then kind of lift my legs up and literally put all of my weight on it. And then also, some of their signs they're built differently, but so some can take a mallet easier than others. Sometimes there's things in the way where you can't mallet it down. That's when body weight comes into play. So I don't know why I've put off making this sign for so long, because it's not like it's gonna taking me all day to do it. It's just sometimes other things seem more appealing. And I'm probably guessing that somehow subconsciously I'm not really wanting to sell the building. And so that is probably why I've been so hesitant on putting a sign up. But if you're interested in the building, I definitely want to sell it. Sometime this winter when it's a nicer day, and we actually have the barn done, we'll be loading everything up and going to the country. So my shop is open November 30th. Wish I had a line right there. For Small Business Saturday on 10 to 4. And then December is, if I'm remembering right, the 12th through the 15th. So it's find the second Saturday on the calendar. And my shop is open Thursday through Sunday that weekend. You can find all the details on thejunkparlor.com. And I mentioned other ways to make signs, you know, printing the reverse image, and then you can trace over the letters outline, or kind of do the pencil rubbing technique like we used to do for leaves. You can do the stencil. You can actually buy transfer paper and do transfer paper that way, where you just print off a word or a poem or something and stick the transfer paper underneath it. Thinking my dad's gonna come and scare me to death. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm concentrating especially, and something startles me, I'm pretty loud and easy to scare. My kids know because they do it to me all of the time. Actually, my husband does it to me quite a bit too, but he knows that he gets smacked pretty hard when he does that, especially intentionally. the other day we were at the gym and I was on the treadmill and I was just like concentrating on the television, I guess, or listening to something on my headset. And I yelled and jumped, even though I knew he was in the building and there's lots of other people in the building, but I'm sure everybody there got a good chuckle. So I'm going to go back to the left again because my arms are going to get in the way if I start on the right side.